Welcome to Shadowlands Ghosts, a place where the ordinary and the unknown blend into an unsettling reality. I'm your host, Raven Blackwood, and I'm glad you found your way here. You know, I've always been drawn to the darker corners of life, the unexplained, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. There's something about the unknown that sparks my curiosity, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. As we settle into this journey together, I want you to feel at home. Imagine we're sitting by a crackling fire, surrounded by the comforting sounds of a quiet night. But as we delve deeper into the shadows, you might start to notice the fire crackling a little too loudly, the darkness outside seeming to press in just a bit too close. That's where the magic happens, my friends. Now, I want to share with you a story that will make you question everything. It's called The Haunting Voicemail, and it's a tale about the most unsettling phone calls you could ever receive. Each message reveals a gruesome detail about a crime that hasn't happened yet, or so you think. The truth is far more sinister, and the victim is closer than you'd care to imagine. So, before we begin, I want to invite you to join our little family of Shadowlands Ghosts. Subscribe to our channel, and you'll get access to a world of terrifying tales, each one more chilling than the last. And, as a special treat, you'll get to experience this story from the perspective of the lead character, a person who's about to receive the most unsettling phone calls of their life. So, sit back, get comfortable, and let the darkness begin. But be warned, once you start down this path, there's no turning back. I'll never forget the day I received the first voicemail. It was a typical Monday morning, and I was already running late for work. As I rushed to grab my bag and head out the door, my phone beeped, signaling a new message. I hesitated for a moment, wondering who could be calling me at such an early hour. But the caller ID only showed a number I'd never seen before. It was a local area code, but the digits seemed jumbled and unfamiliar. I shrugged it off, thinking it might be a wrong number or a telemarketer. But as I listened to the message, a shiver ran down my spine. The voice on the other end was low and gravelly, with an undertone of menace. It was a man's voice, but there was something unsettling about the way he spoke, like he was trying to convey a sense of urgency without actually saying anything. The message itself was brief and cryptic. They'll find her body in the alleyway behind the old warehouse on 5th and Main. The killer will be long gone, but the scent of lavender will linger. I was taken aback by the graphic imagery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of prank call. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, asking the caller to identify themselves and explain the strange message. But as the days went by, I received more voicemails, each one revealing a gruesome detail about a crime that hadn't happened yet. The victims were always women, and the methods were always twisted and brutal. At first, I thought it was just a sick joke, but as the messages continued, I started to feel a growing sense of unease. Who was behind these calls, and how did they know such intimate details about these crimes? And why were they telling me about them? As I walked to work that morning, the city streets seemed to take on a different tone. The sounds of the city, the chatter of pedestrians, the honking of cars, seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, with the voicemails echoing in my mind like a sinister refrain. And then there was the feeling of being watched. I couldn't shake the sensation that someone was following me, watching my every move. I quickened my pace, but the feeling only intensified. It was as if I was being pulled into a world of darkness, one that I couldn't escape. As I reached my office building, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was safe, I told myself. I was among people in a place of safety. But as I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind me with a metallic clang, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in a world of horror with no way out. As I stepped out of the elevator on the 23rd floor, the fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in unison, casting an eerie glow over the deserted hallway. I had always loved the early morning hours, when the office was still quiet and I could get a head start on my work. But today, the silence felt oppressive, like a weight was pressing down on me. I made my way to my cubicle, my eyes scanning the rows of empty desks. The only sound was the hum of the computers and the soft rustle of the air conditioning vents. I settled into my chair, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had been growing inside me since the first voicemail. As I booted up my computer, my mind began to wander back to the messages. Who was behind them? What did they want from me? And why were they telling me about these crimes? I felt a shiver run down my spine as I thought about the latest message, the one that had come in just that morning. The voice had been different this time, softer and more melodic. But the words had been just as chilling. The next one will be found in the park near the old oak tree. The killer will leave a token, a small silver locket with a photo of a woman inside. I had tried to call the number back, but it had gone straight to voicemail again. As I sat there, lost in thought, I became aware of a faint scent in the air. It was sweet and floral like lavender. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that it was the same scent mentioned in the first voicemail. I looked around, wondering if someone was playing a prank on me, but I was alone. The scent seemed to grow stronger, filling my lungs with its sweet, cloying aroma. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, and my vision began to blur. Suddenly, I was back in the alleyway behind the old warehouse, the one mentioned in the first voicemail. I saw a body lying on the ground, a woman with a look of terror frozen on her face. I jerked back to reality, my heart racing. I was in my cubicle, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of the office. But the scent of lavender still lingered in the air, a reminder that I was not safe, that the world of horror was closing in around me. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept wandering back to the voicemails. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. And then I saw it. A small piece of paper on my desk with a message scrawled on it in red ink. They're watching you. I spun around, but there was no one there. The office was still deserted, the only sound the hum of the computers. But I knew that I was not alone. I knew that I was being watched, that the killer was closing in. And then the lights went out. The office was plunged into darkness, and I was left alone with my fears. I was trapped with no way out. And I knew that I was not safe. The darkness was absolute, a heavy blanket that suffocated me. I was frozen in terror, my heart pounding in my chest like a jackhammer. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sound, any movement, but there was nothing. As I sat there, paralyzed with fear, I began to realize the true nature of the horror that was unfolding around me. The voicemails, the messages, the scent of lavender, it was all part of a twisted game, a game designed to torment me, to break me. The killer was not just a random psychopath, but a calculating, ruthless individual who had been watching me, studying me, manipulating me from the very beginning. They had been playing on my deepest fears, using my own guilt and paranoia against me. The messages, the phone calls, the scent of lavender, It was all part of a carefully constructed web of terror, designed to ensnare me, to trap me in a world of fear and uncertainty. And now, with the lights out and the office plunged into darkness, I was at their mercy. I knew that I had to move to try and escape, but my body seemed frozen, unable to respond. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no way out. And then I heard it. A faint sound, a rustling, a movement. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The killer was moving, closing in. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat, unable to escape. The sound grew louder, more distinct. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The killer was coming for me, and I was powerless to stop them. I was at their mercy, trapped in a world of horror, with no escape. The footsteps stopped right outside my cubicle. I could feel the killer's presence, a cold, malignant force that seemed to seep into my very bones. I knew that I was about to face the ultimate terror, the culmination of all my fears. And then, the lights flickered back on, casting an eerie glow over the deserted office. The killer was standing right in front of me, a twisted grin spreading across their face. I saw the glint of a knife in their hand, and I knew that I was doomed. The killer's face was distorted, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity. But as I looked deeper, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. The killer's eyes were my own, staring back at me with a malevolent intensity. I realized in that moment that the killer was not just a random psychopath, but a part of me, a manifestation of my own darkest fears and desires. I was trapped in a world of horror, and I was the monster. The knife flashed in the dim light, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. I was about to face the ultimate horror, the culmination of all my fears. And I knew that I would never escape. As the killer's twisted grin spread across their face, I felt a wave of terror wash over me, threatening to consume me whole. The knife glinted in the dim light, its edge seeming to shimmer with a malevolent intensity, as if it too were alive and hungering for my blood. The killer's eyes, my own eyes, stared back at me with a cold, calculating ferocity, and I felt my mind reel in horror. I was trapped in a world of my own making, a world where the lines between reality and nightmare were blurred beyond recognition. The killer took a step closer, their movements deliberate and calculated, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. I was frozen in terror, unable to move or speak, as the killer's hand rose, the knife glinting in the dim light. And then, in a flash of insight, I understood. The killer was not just a part of me, but a manifestation of my own darkest fears and desires. I was the monster, the one who had been terrorizing myself all along. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. I knew that I had the power to stop the killer, to break free from the cycle of fear and horror that had been consuming me. But I also knew that it would require me to confront the darkest depths of my own soul. The killer's hand flashed down, the knife slicing through the air with a deadly precision. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, but I knew that I had to act. With a surge of adrenaline, I reached out and grasped the killer's wrist, holding it in a fierce grip. For a moment, we were locked in a silent struggle, the killer's eyes blazing with a malevolent intensity as they tried to break free. But I held firm, my grip like a vice as I stared into the killer's eyes, my own eyes. And then, in a flash of insight, I saw it. The truth. The horror. The reality. I saw that the killer was not just a part of me, but a reflection of my own darkest fears and desires. I saw that I was the monster, the one who had been terrorizing myself all along. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. I knew that I had the power to stop the killer, to break free from the cycle of fear and horror that had been consuming me. But I also knew that it would require me to confront the darkest depths of my own soul. With a surge of strength, I pushed the killer away, the knife clattering to the floor as I stumbled backward, gasping for breath. I was free from the cycle of fear and horror that had been consuming me. But as I looked down at the killer's body, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. The killer's face was my own, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity. And in that moment, I knew that I would never be free from the horror that lurked within me. The darkness closed in around me, a heavy blanket that suffocated me. I was trapped in a world of horror, a world where the lines between reality and nightmare were blurred beyond recognition. And I knew that I would never escape. As I stood there, frozen in horror, I realized that the killer's body was not moving. It was as if time itself had stopped, and all that was left was the echoes of my own fear. I took a step back, my eyes fixed on the twisted face that stared back at me, and I knew that I was not alone. The darkness began to close in around me, a heavy blanket that suffocated me. I felt my breath catch in my throat and my heart pounding in my chest. I was trapped in a world of horror, a world where the lines between reality and nightmare were blurred beyond recognition. And then, I heard my own voice whispering back to me. "You'll never be free," it said. "You'll never escape the horror that lurks within you." The voice was my own, yet it was not my own. It was the voice of the killer, the voice of my own darkest fears and desires. I turned to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The voice laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of horror from which I would never escape. The darkness closed in around me, a heavy blanket that suffocated me. I felt my consciousness slipping away, and I knew that I was being pulled back into the nightmare from which I had tried to awaken. As the darkness consumed me, I saw the killer's face one last time. It was my own face, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity. And in that moment, I knew that I was the monster, the one who had been terrorizing myself all along. The last thing I heard was my own voice whispering back to me. "You'll never be free," it said. "You'll never escape the horror that lurks within you." And then everything went black. When I awoke, I was back in my own bed, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. It was as if the whole thing had been just a dream, a nightmare from which I had finally awakened. But as I looked in the mirror, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. The killer's face stared back at me, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity. And I knew that I would never be free from the horror that lurked within me. Epilogue, the reflection in the mirror. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the face that stared back at me. The killer's face, my own face, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I would never be free from the horror that lurked within me. As I gazed deeper into the mirror, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The face in the mirror, my own face, began to change. The eyes turned darker, the skin paler, and the lips twisted into a cruel smile. It was as if the killer was trying to break free from within me to emerge into the world once more. I tried to look away, but I was transfixed by the horror that stared back at me. The face in the mirror began to laugh, a cold, mirthless sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of horror from which I would never escape. And then, the mirror began to rattle and shake. The face in the mirror grew distorted, as if it was being reflected in rippling water. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest, as the mirror seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces. But as I looked down at the broken glass, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The face in the mirror, my own face, was staring back at me from each shattered piece. It was as if the killer had broken free and was now spreading, infecting every part of me. I knew then that I was lost, trapped in a world of horror from which I would never escape. The killer was me, and I was the killer. We were one and the same, forever bound together in a dance of terror and despair. As I stood there, surrounded by the shattered remains of the mirror, I knew that I would never be free from the horror that lurked within me. The killer's face stared back at me, twisted into a grotesque parody of humanity, and I knew that I would never be able to escape the horrors that I had created. The darkness closed in around me, a heavy blanket that suffocated me. I felt my consciousness slipping away, and I knew that I was being pulled back into the nightmare from which I had tried to awaken. And as the darkness consumed me, I heard my own voice whispering back to me. "You'll never be free," it said. "You'll never escape the horror that lurks within you." As we conclude this episode of The Reflection in the Mirror, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for joining me on this journey. Your engagement and interest in this story mean the world to me, and I'm so glad that I could share this terrifying tale with you. As we reflect on the events that unfolded, I want to remind you that the true horror lies not in the external world, but in the darkness that lurks within us. It's a reminder that we must confront our own fears and demons in order to truly overcome them. Before we part ways, I want to invite you to join our community of like-minded individuals who share a passion for storytelling and exploration of the human psyche. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our channel for more thought-provoking and spine-tingling content. We have a wide range of stories and topics lined up for you, and I'm confident that you'll find something that resonates with you. By subscribing, you'll not only get access to our latest episodes, but you'll also be supporting our mission to create high-quality content that challenges and inspires our audience. Your subscription means the world to us, and we're grateful for your support. So, if you're ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery and exploration, please click the subscribe button below. Let's continue to explore the depths of human nature and confront the horrors that lurk within us together. And as a special thank you for subscribing, we'll be sharing exclusive content and behind-the-scenes insights into our creative process. You'll get to see the making of our episodes and learn more about the inspiration behind our stories. Once again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you in the future. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's keep exploring the unknown together.